Hi, friend.
Jenna, I'll go ahead and work on admitting folks while you're
Okay.
doing the introductions and stuff.
All right.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
We'll just give it a couple more seconds. Welcome, everybody. All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Jenna Kirkpatrick, and I am the manager of outreach and engagement for Evermore. Evermore is a national nonprofit based out of Washington, D.C. For over 10 years, we have worked with Congress, the White House, and multiple federal agencies to advance common sense, human centered policies, including securing paid bereavement leave for our U.S. Armed Services. We advocate for meaningful policy change, advance bereavement science, and cultivate innovative programming among communities. We are honored to host James Cruz's book launch tonight with our Evermore Poet Laureate, Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer. Please visit us at evermore.org to learn more about our mission to make the world a more livable place for all bereaved people. We will also be sharing a special newsletter with you after this workshop called Evermore Voices. It will contain the recording of this workshop and the featured poems and invitations to write from James and Rosemerry. Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer lives with her husband and daughter in Placerville, Colorado, on the banks of the wild and untamed San Miguel River. She teaches and performs poetry for mindfulness retreats, women's retreats, teachers, addiction recovery programs, scientists, hospice, literary burlesque, and more. You can find out more about Rosemerry at wordwoman.com and read her daily poems at 100fallingveils.com. And I will put these links in the chat too. As a teacher of mindfulness and writing courses, retreats, and webinars for more than a decade, beloved poet, editor, and writer James Cruz has seen again and again how poems can initiate a deep dive into our own experience and how reflecting on poetry can open the floodgates of feeling. Turning Toward Grief presents a collection of highly accessible and comforting poems, many of which have been shared by thousands of people. Sign up for weekly poems and prompts and learn more about James at jamescruz.net. So please join me in welcoming these two beloved poets, James Cruz and Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer.
Thank you so much, Jenna. Thank you to everyone at Evermore for having us this evening. It feels so lovely to be here with all of you who have gathered and to be here with Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer, who is not only poet laureate at Evermore, but she is also the poet laureate of my heart. For sure, for sure. I know that to be true. And yeah, so I think how this evening will unfold is that a lot of you are used to the kinds of programs that Rosemary and I offer. We love to be in conversation with each other through poetry and around poetry. And so we'll allow that to unfold tonight. But because my book, Turning Toward Grief, is composed of poems as well as reflections and writing prompts, we wanted to give all of you a chance, if you feel called to do so, to do a little bit of writing with us. So we'll do a couple of writing exercises as well throughout the evening. And yeah, did you want to say anything else, Rosemary?
Well, yeah, I think I might just start with a little welcoming everyone here ritual. And I think to do that, let's maybe begin with a little bit of silence and an invitation to put your hands anywhere on your body. I'm going to close my eyes because that feels good to me, but you don't have to, of course. But maybe close your eyes and maybe open your hands, open your palms, and let them rest anywhere on your body. Maybe your chest over your heart, maybe on your thighs or against your belly, or maybe even cradle your own face, as if you could thank your body for showing up. Thank you, body. And just taking a moment to arrive together. And then opening your eyes and saying, oh, hello. Hello, James. Hello, Rosemary. And hello to the people who you can see in a little strip on top of your screen. Hello. Welcome to every other person who's chosen to show up here. And I think maybe as another way to invite you in, if there is someone or something in particular that you are grieving tonight, then I invite you to put that in the chat bar, the person's name or the name of the whatever it is that you're grieving, and we'll invite all of it to come into this space with us right now. And as you're bringing those names into the chat bar, I'll just sing a little song, a grief song from Langston Hughes. And please read the names as they come in out loud in your own muted space. But say the name of your person, the name of your people, the name of what it is you're grieving, but say out loud someone else's names also while I'm singing this song again from Langston Hughes. Wave of sorrow, do not drown me now. I see the island still ahead somehow. I see the island, its sands are fair. Wave of sorrow, take me there. Wave of sorrow, do not drown me now. I see the island still ahead somehow. I see the island, its sands are fair. Wave of sorrow, take me there. Thank you for adding the names, for saying them aloud for yourself and each other. And I'll just add Finn and Dad and Kira. James, you want to say a name or two out loud?
Sure. My mother, my father, my brother.
Thank you. And I just want to point us to part of the reason, the main reason we're here together is this beautiful book, Turning Toward Grief, which is, as James said, not only poems, but also reflections on the poems, and also invitations for doing your own writing and reflection. And I don't know, James, maybe let's just start with what how did the book happen? Tell us,
Mm,
what's your origin story with Turning Toward Grief?
sure. Yeah. Well, it really began back in 2022, which, there are certain years in your life when things feel especially overwhelming and almost out of balance. There's a cascade of transitions, changes, losses, and that was that year for me. So I transitioned from a job as a university professor that I loved very much. I lost both of my grandmothers. I lost my mother and became even more estranged from my brother. And those losses just piled up. I have this image of losses being like the strata in rocks carved out beside a river. You can see them. They feel hard, so present. There's this pressure pressing down on you. And that was that year for me. And so
Parents, comma, brother, comma, close friends.
the slow emergence from that time really allowed me to begin to write about it. I was writing the whole time, but I wasn't really able to scratch the surface of the grief that I was feeling. Um, and then finally, as I was coming out of that time, I was starting to write and share poems of, grieving for my mother, poems of loss, and really, a lot of poems that were written for me, directed toward myself and then offered to other people in the hopes that those poems might help, others as they were navigating their own grief journeys, whatever the grief might be. And as I've often said, Rosemary, you were such an example of how to be present to grief and really how to turn toward it as a difficult, often unwelcome, welcome teacher, you know, um, really touching in on grief as this contradictory, necessary, enlivening force in our lives because as all of these names and situations that people have put in the chat reveal, all of us are, very acquainted with grief and the many sorrows that see us through a lifetime. And so, I've never had a book happen this way, but because I share my poems as you do very freely, I usually post them on social media and send them out through my weekly email newsletter. There was an editor who was somehow following me and receiving my newsletter, and she contacted my agent and asked if, very gently, tenderly, if I might be willing and interested in doing a short book of poems around grief with some writing invitations and things like that. And, initially I was hesitant to agree to that because I think, like most people, I didn't want to go into my grief again. I didn't want to relive that experience. And I knew that's what I would have to do if I was going to go back and revise the poems and write about each poem and offer some context. So that's really how the book happened. It was Broadleaf Books based in Minneapolis that approached me about it. And really, it was my husband who said, you've already got the poems, you're already doing the work, and, maybe you could just offer this up for other people and see this as an intentional thing that you're giving to the world. And so that's how the book came about. And I really, I don't mean to sound ungrateful. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to publish it. And it's been so, in the bit of time that it's been out so far, it's been so gratifying to hear from people who've been touched by the poems or want to share them or, share it with groups or in hospice situations or, all these different places that poetry pops up. But at the same time, didn't want to do the project and was surprised by the amount of resistance I had, even as it was, I had signed a contract and was putting it all together. I just didn't, I really resisted going back into the grief with even wider open heart and wider open eyes. And I kind of took that to my therapist, and she suggested setting a timer each day and giving it 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And and luckily I had some time before the manuscript needed to be turned in and was able to do it piecemeal. So, not everything needs to be written about for sure, and not everyone needs to or wants to go back into their grief. But if you do feel called to do something, but also find yourself in the midst of this resistance, if you're a writer out there, then I suggest the same thing. And I also um, bookended each of those writing and revision sessions with, a sweet cup of tea for myself, or a walk in the woods, or listening to some music, something that would take me out of that world and kind of bring me back into my body, back into that place of arrival that you refer to, Rosemary, in our opening meditation there. So that's how it came to be. And I think I have never felt so intimate or personal with a book because I really felt the spirits of my ancestors, all of them, but especially my more recently lost people, my grandmothers, my mother and father, especially. I really felt them getting behind these poems and essays and lifting up this project. And I have to suspect that it happened in part because there were forces at work out in the mystery that I had nothing to do with.
Mhm.
So that's how it came to be.
Oh, it's such a beautiful story, James, and I'm so grateful you included your resistance. It's true. How to turn toward grief is no small thing. To say yes, I'll meet it again and again and again. And know that each time we'll continue to be opened by it and that isn't often it isn't comfortable. That often it can feel like a re-injury. It can be at the very least it's going to ask us to be so utterly present and and that can be tough. So what a gift you gave to everyone else by doing it. I don't know. I'm curious about in the end what kind of or was there a gift to yourself from it, from the
Mm.
process?
Well, can I read a poem and then answer?
Please, of
Okay.
course, yes.
Well, there was this poem that came to me during, I did a little solo writing retreat in Quebec City, which is just a little ways north of us here in Vermont. And it was Mother's Day weekend. I didn't plan it that way, but it was Mother's Day weekend while I was gone. And so I think my mind planned that for me so that I would be, alone and receptive during that time. And so this poem came to me and and it's called Made Visible. Some days I wish our pain was visible, that our grief gave off a slight glimmer from the center of the chest, so that as we walked down the street, shifting a bag of olive oil and bread from one hand to the other, every passer-by might see a glow lifting off of us like moonlight on the surface of broken water, and know to soften their eyes and whisper, hello. So I think the gift of this book, one of the many gifts, is that it makes my own pain visible to me, to other people, so that even as I'm reading a poem like that, I'm just overcome with the emotion. I can still feel that poem when it first moved through me. And so I don't forget, so I don't push it away or take for granted the life that is still being offered to me right now, even without the people I would prefer to be sharing it with, the people who I would prefer to be talking to or be here with, that there is still life here and that loss coexists with the beauty and the everyday sacredness of life. That olive oil and bread in the bag is, you know, so sacred to me,
Mm,
that I get to eat and pick out olive oil and bread and carry it with me. And so I think that that is the main gift, not just for myself, but for other people to make that pain visible and make it apparent.
yeah.
Yeah, not to dwell in it, not to sort of wallow in it, but to own it. It's that image of the moonlight on broken water. It's jagged. It has a quiet, dark beauty to it. And I think that death can and grief can teach us to live in those dark places with more awareness and to see beauty where we might not have seen it before.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I'm thinking about this in one of my books in The Unfolding. I came up with a bunch of new words for praise, and one of them I think is exactly this, what you're talking about, sarom,
Mhm.
the word sorrow plus om, which is, the Hindu, other religions too, the original sound, which is really a sound of assent, meaning yes, yes to what's here, and then turning toward the grief, yes to the sorrow, sarom. But then what is the beauty then that's available to us? Really only because we're in this period of grief, right? Really, how does the fact that you are in this period of grief help you say, "Oh yes, praise the olive oil, praise the spread, praise this moment where I'm still alive, where I can feel hunger not just for food but for life itself."
Absolutely. And I think of your lines too. I think it's from the poem Sacred Ground in The Unfolding. I want to worship at the shrine of everywhere. I think that is the gift that grief and a remembrance of our mortality gives us, that we, not in every moment, we're human, we're gonna forget and remember and forget again, but we have a greater capacity to find that shrine or that temple that we can enter almost anywhere in our life, and to see that there's as much beauty in the olive oil and bread, or the peonies that are just starting to bud out in spring and placed in the vase, or when I was with my mother in the hospital, or the final week we had together, there was such beauty and there was such sorrow at the same time, such pain that she was feeling that I was already beginning to feel. And I think that remembering that, holding that close, becomes a gift to us in the ways that we choose to go on and choose to live our lives.
Mm-hmm.
I think once we move past those initial feelings of fresh grief, that this is not fair, why is this happening to me? Those are still always probably going to come up, but I think they can become less burdensome the more we turn toward our grief as well as the life that is still available to us.
Yeah. And I'm thinking too about how we do that not only alone but together.
Yes.
I think that
Yes.
part of your poem, Made Visible, is thinking about the way that if people could see and they could offer us the softest hello, that there's a way that we don't carry it alone, right? Someone who I don't know this, I don't know who said this, but something like joy shared is joy doubled, and pain shared is pain divided. And there's a way that when we show up together with our vulnerable, broken open selves, like we're doing tonight, right? Like you, me, and everyone else who's chosen to show up tonight, has this sense of here we are together. There's a communion of broken hearts, that is part of the beauty, that is part of the gift of that turning toward.
Mhm.
Um, Actually, I have a poem about that from a retreat I did at Kripalu November. It was a 4-day grief retreat, and this I think I wrote toward the end of it, called "Those of Us Who Choose to Turn Toward Grief." Somehow we find each other, Though our gathering doesn't fix or change the loss, there is tenderness, even beauty, in coming together. I have read in Switzerland it's illegal to own just one guinea pig. It's considered animal abuse because they are social beings. We, too, are social beings. Perhaps we don't sniff and nudge and squeak and rumble strut. That's a technical term for the guinea pigs, by the way. They rumble strut. But we cradle, we hum, we hold, we whisper soft encouragement, light candles, offer tissues, hug. There are times when I deeply need to be alone with my grief. Even then, curled into myself, quiet in a quiet, dark room, even then I am held by the certainty I am not alone. What a gift we give to ourselves, to each other, when, in our grief, we enter the circle of those who grieve and meet each other with open hands and say, I see you, brother. I see you, sister. I know. It isn't easy. Here I am.
Mm.
Here I am.
Yeah.
How do we come together? By the way, I'm wrong. I did not write that at that retreat. I wrote another poem called Those of Us Who Choose to Turn Toward Grief at that retreat. Two
Mm.
titles. Same title, two poems.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, what a beautiful example of the communion that you were talking about. And there's a way in which I think of communion as merging, or an immersion of the self, not losing the self, but an immersion of the self within a larger container, within a larger group. And I think there's so much relief that comes from that. But in order to do that, we have to make our pain visible. We have to be seen and known. And that poem, especially the Made Visible one that I shared, came in part because I just got tired of explaining. That's the hard part of loss too, is that you have to explain it and re-explain it and re-explain it. And I just was like, is there some way that people could just know he's in pain, he's in grief, he lost these people. There isn't, of course. There used to be other rituals and traditions that we might follow that would signal that, but in our culture today, it's not the case. And so we do have to do that work. And it is work of making ourselves known, expressing ourselves in the ways that feel right to express grief. But I think your poem illustrates so well that coming together and that, here I am, sort of like a raising of the hand, like here I am for me, but I'm also here for you and here for the energy that's created in a room like that or a room like this when we all choose to come together and really let ourselves be seen, let our hearts be known.
Yeah. I don't. I'm going to suggest
Please.
that maybe we offer a writing invitation from your poem.
Yeah.
Do you want? Can I read it out loud for
Yeah.
folks, or do you want to?
Absolutely. No, go ahead.
I want you all to know how much I love this book. I'm not just saying that because James is my friend and I love him, although it's true. But I'm also just saying it because it really does seem to me to be a book that meets us in the many different places where we are with our grief. And I feel like this book is a beautiful companion for that. And by the way, it also feels good in the hands. Like
Yes.
this book actually feels like a little bit like a hug. It's like somehow a little bit soft.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and it's
Yeah.
beautiful. So this is the invitation that James offers out of that poem that he read. Allowing yourself to speak from the place of your own deep grief, you might begin by writing, Some days I wish, and see what arises for you. Let the wish be wild, or strange or sincere. In the face of this new pain, what do you wish that others could simply know on seeing you? So, I don't know, James, how much time do you think?
Maybe just 10 minutes.
Like 10
Just,
minutes.
yeah, see what arises in 10 minutes and don't think about it too much. And if the poem leads you in a different direction, other than the prompt, please feel free to follow that. There's no right or wrong. We won't be checking the tests for accuracy or anything like that. So please feel free to go your own way. But yeah, you might just start off with that initial activating phrase, some days I wish, and see what comes. So
So,
about 10 minutes.
yeah, I'll give everybody about a 1 minute warning
Okay.
when it's time to come back in.
Okay.
And about 1 more minute. And welcome back.
It was a beautiful idea. Thank you so much for inviting us to write about that particular poem. Mm. Mm. Well, maybe I'll share something else from the book. Spring Equinox. Looking down at the pink, unlit wicks of the crocuses and daffodil buds swollen but taking their own sweet time. I wonder if an equinox also occurs in us during grief, if some personal sun crosses the equator as our nights begin to grow shorter, daylight filling our lives for longer and longer periods. These perennials are wise. They sense sleet, high winds, the shroud of snow to come. Maybe there are parts of us that know without our knowing when it's time to open again. We just wake up one morning drenched in light and shivering, forever changed.
I'm noticing the incredible trust in that poem.
Mm.
To be able to say that maybe there are parts of us that are able to know what we don't know, right? That go beyond the conscious, I don't know if I mean that word, that go beyond the brain, that the programmed brain.
Mm. Yeah,
Maybe it's the more conscious part of us,
yeah,
really,
right.
that is able to say, oh, look what's happening. Oh, look, it's time to open. Oh, look, look, this is the shift. It's happening,
Mhm.
and gets on board. And um, such an interesting awareness then to begin to be able to trust this whole process wherever we're at in it. Oh, and in this moment I'm angry, and in this moment there's this opening, and in this moment there's beauty, and in this moment I'm curled in a ball on the ground. And just to trust that this is what it is. This is what it is right now. This is it. This is it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for picking up on that. I think you're absolutely right. That I didn't know that, of course, when I wrote the poem, or the poem wrote itself through me, however this works. But it is very much about trust, and trusting not not even just in the process, but I think for me that there was a process that was unfolding that I wasn't necessarily aware of in my logical brain, or really even attuned to, but certain things would just happen, or I would be called to certain things, or I could feel in the same way that, at least where I live, it's a very slow incremental shift from winter to spring, and, a little forward and then a little back. And it just felt like a very similar process to how um, turning toward grief, welcoming grief was working for me in my own life. And, there are peonies on the cover and, way too many poems probably about peonies in the book because we love looking out at the window and tracing this very incremental, and then it's not so incremental. It's just this like extravagant, huge opening of these things that are way more intricate and beautiful than they need to be. I mean, really, like why all the ruffles? Why do these things need to be that amazingly beautiful? Probably a scientist could explain it, but
And effulgently odoriferous also, right?
yes, those are the perfect words because those are, Baroque grandiose words for these Baroque grandiose flowers. But there is still this slow process of opening. And if you really pay attention, you see that incremental nature of things. And you see that there is also, just to go back to that idea of communion and needing others, that there's a mutualism at work, that probably there is a reason for all those ruffles. There is a reason that the peonies bloom the way that they do. And I know that there's a reason that ants crawl up and down and feed on the nectar of the peony buds because they're keeping, the thrips and the non-beneficial insects away from the peonies. So there's this deeper natural process that I think is unfolding for all of us in the midst of sorrow and grief. And, I think it can sound a little bit flip to say, like, you just have to trust that. Nobody really wants to hear that. But I think when you can hear it, as I heard it from you, reading your daily poems as you were going through your own deep grief journey after the loss of Finn and your dad, if you can hear from other people that there is this process, that trust has its own rewards in the midst of it, that it doesn't save you from the pain, but that it has those rewards of aliveness and embodiedness to what is true, then I think it's like, okay, well, maybe this is possible for me too. If the little crocuses, if the daffodils can do it when they're getting, sleeted upon and snowed upon, then maybe I can do it too. And I can trust that it was right to open up, even though, I went out to see a concert or a play and felt like cowering in the corner when I got back home because it took so much energy, just these ways that we venture out and then kind of venture back in and venture out again, that there's this give, take, push, pull to the whole process. Um, what more would you say about trust and the idea that there is a process? I mean, I know your last book is called The Unfolding, probably for a good reason.
It's the color of a peony.
True. It's true.
Oh, that trust is I think it's such an enormous part of it, James. And I
Yeah.
think that I don't think you need to have had an established poetry practice or writing practice for it to be helpful for us at any point. But I also think that having an established practice, I already had the trust in place that I could show up.
Mm.
Um, and that if I did, that I don't want to say that there's a reward. That's not exactly it.
No, yeah.
More that if I do choose to show up, that there is a generosity, a possibility, the potential of opening that happens when we make that choice to say, okay, I'm here, I'll turn toward grief. Noticing the resistance, hello, resistance. And noticing that the resistance isn't a problem, actually, right? That resistance is actually a part of it. Of course, we want to resist it. And that when we, in the face of our longing to resist, to say, okay, all right, for this moment, I love your timer for these 30 minutes. I will I will give it everything I can. I'll let myself be as vulnerable as possible. Um,
Yeah.
I do think that the trust develops the more we do it. And I noticed in my own, beyond the writing part, I noticed in my own grief part, I noticed the more that I trusted my heart, the, and oh, by the way, not my head.
Yeah.
I felt like my head was a super unreliable narrator
Hmm.
during this time.
Hmm.
But if I could, if I, every time I showed up with my heart, there was a generosity. That's the word I feel. I could feel how held I was by love. It was never something that I could not meet. That love would cradle every smallest part of the ache and say, yes, the ache is here, and all this love will surround it and make it possible to meet it.
Hmm.
And there was one moment, I think I spoke of this the other day. It was the first time I'd remembered it in years when I started to hyperventilate. I was having a little bit of I think it was a panic attack
Hmm.
around Finn and his loss and the grief. And I remember I couldn't breathe. I was terrified. And I felt it here. Like I really felt it here. And I was aware that I was not feeling it here in my body where most of the pain had been. And up until that point I had been so aware that I was having this fully embodied experience that really centered around my heart, and I was so aware of my heart and my chest and this kind of squeeze that I'd been feeling for, well, it lasted for months. And when I was in the midst of this kind of panic attack, I was like, I noticed, oh, I don't feel my heart. I am not feeling my heart. And it was in that awareness then of thinking, I have been able to trust my heart every step of the way. I have been able to trust love every step of the way to hold me. And like it was almost like I just had to like be like, hello heart, here I am heart, here I am, here I am, and felt the heart energy come forward again, felt the love again, which is ultimately what took. It was so scary, James. I remember being so afraid. What is going to happen? I can't breathe. I can't fathom this moment. And then bringing love back in, bringing it back into the body. And how, so that moment, how it profoundly allowed for a new trust in love and my body itself to help carry me through the
Hmm.
loss.
Hmm.
That I could trust love, that I could trust love
Yeah. And the body itself
and the body.
to show you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I've heard Mark Nepo talk about it as seeing with the eyes of the heart. We see with our physical eyes, we think with our, so-called logical brain. And, that gets us only so far. But when we're dealing with something as deep as this, I think you're absolutely right that we have to listen to and trust very deeply. I think it takes a radical trust down to the root
All the
to
way.
trust the heart. And maybe that's part of how I was able to go back into this project and put this project together, is that my head wasn't guiding me. I wasn't doing it for, this greater monetary reward or fame or, anything like that, that it was a heart-centered project. That didn't mean that it wasn't really, really hard. But my heart was guiding me every step of the way, and I felt like the love of the people around me and the people I had lost were nudging me along. And it is often gentle nudges that I think we feel
Mhm.
um, from those we have lost, from these other forces that are, letting us know we're not alone, as you said in your poem, and letting us know that we are guided. I have some pretty braided spiritual beliefs, but I do believe that we are guided. I couldn't explain it to you. I couldn't pinpoint exactly who or what that force is. I don't think it's a single force, but I do believe that we are led, and we are led in service of ourselves and other people at the same time. And, I wanted to go back to that word I used, reward, because it absolutely does not feel like the right word, in part because I've heard people talk about it with, any sort of practice, but especially like a spiritual practice, say meditation, where the goal is to just be present with the pain in your body and the breath in and out and whatever arises in your mind. And, it's almost laughable to say that the deeper you go into this practice, the more you embrace this practice, the reward is, yes, perhaps more joy, more lightness, but it is also more pain and more deeply feeling
Yeah.
whatever is flowing through you at a given time. So I agree, reward is not the right word, but it's almost like the widest definition of what a reward could be, which is everything, all of it, tangled up all at once.
Right. Right. Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, all of it. Of course, all of it. Yeah. Oh, language. It's so important and it always just misses. It just
Yes,
like
totally. And it's fast. I want to look up reward and see like, well, what is the origin of the word reward and what does that really mean?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it can lead us into some interesting places, but it so often misses the mark,
Yeah.
especially when we're talking about these deeper intangibles and these deeper mysteries
Right.
of human
Enormous and
existence.
ineffable. How could we ever how many poems have I written about grief, James Cruz?
Mm.
Hundreds now? Hundreds? Many hundreds?
Yeah.
And have I really touched it? Have I
Mm.
explained all of grief? Not a chance. Have you? No way, right? There's maybe we touch it just for a moment. This is something I always I try to always say it before I lead a class on grief or a retreat. I say, friends, we're not going to write it all in one poem.
Mhm.
I think that sometimes there's this expectation like I'll write the poem and I'll have covered it. And the pressure that we put on the poem in that case, right? To try and tell the whole story of the person's life and their grief and our grief and no, it will not happen. That's utterly unrealistic. So to know that each moment that our grief is changing, that our relationship with whatever it is that we are grieving is changing, uh, and that this it goes on and on. Like each time we it's like we, as Emily Dickinson would say, we circle and circle and circle. It's as if, my business is circumference and we get to see it from a
Mm.
new angle again and again and again and again and again and again and again. Always getting to meet it newly. Uh, I wanted to read another poem in your book. And this is one that made me think of it when you were talking about this, I guess, how we show up and how do others show up to meet us in these moments too.
Mm.
So this is a poem called How to Comfort Someone. Be the patch of sunlight on the floor so that as someone comes near, they feel your warmth and can bask in the subtle glow. Be the clear window with shades pulled up and the sparkle of snow, which holds space for all that falls into it. Be the water glass, filled at the faucet, then offered to another in need, and let them drink and drink until it's time for you to go, leaving like the slow fade of the setting sun on a winter day. Traces of pink light spread like a balm across the sky.
Mm.
What do you notice hearing it read back to you?
Mm. Well, I noticed, I mean, I guess just to build on our previous conversation that, I'm a different writer now, and grief is the never ending, ever changing story. So I think How to Comfort Someone would be a different poem for me now. Um, I'm not sure exactly how, but I just, I receive where I was, and I think I love that image of I love sunsets. So I love that image of the sunset like a palm in the sky, if one can say that about their own work. And yeah, I think hearing it in another voice, I am taken back to that time. I mean, I can remember where I was in my house writing that poem when that
Yeah.
poem first came to me, what I was looking out at, the horizon beyond the bare trees. So I think it is surreal when you have these mysterious, mystical experiences, whether it's, grief, anger, love, heartbreak, all of it, and you write it down and you sort of, I don't want to say capture it because I think it's still changing, but you contain it somehow and you're able to look at it from a distance. It is very surreal. It is a little strange to look back at that previous self and to realize that growth and change has happened in a very short period of time,
Yeah.
in the grand scheme. I mean, it didn't feel short when I was going through it, but yeah, just how slow and quick healing can be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I have a fairly recent poem about that. I guess my thinking is I could never have written this years ago.
yeah,
Uh, but now I could. It was a there's so much delight in this poem. Um, so I'll just share it called Late Night Flight. Expecting my daughter to come in late, I slept lightly, attentive to the slightest sound. Imagine my surprise when my son, dead 4 years, came into my room and spoke soft in my ear to let me know he was home. I hugged him so long, wondered aloud why I hadn't been expecting him. Let him know his sister had taken over their old room. Together, we sorted through his old art projects, old shirts, old shoes. When his sister came home, we hugged her too and played chase, leaping over the bed, the chairs. We were laughing, squealing, alive. Soon I was floating, zagging through the air with wild delight. Not because I was trying to fly, more like I was a leaf lifted by wind, soaring with no effort of my own. I chased them, my son and daughter, in this way through the dream into the day, and our laughter was then and now and somehow inside me forever. It
mm,
was so happy,
yeah,
James. It was so happy.
mm,
It was so joyful. It was so astonishingly wonderful. And I woke up with such exuberance, exhilaration. Like I'd spent I'd spent the night laughing with my son. It was
mhm,
so wonderful.
yeah,
I think I'm crying now for grief and joy, like
yeah,
just the wondrousness, glory of it, and how, like you were saying, how we are meeting that grief, how it changes, and it changes sometimes quickly and sometimes not freaking at all.
yeah,
Sometimes it's just how it is, how it is, how it is, how it is. Oh, no, it's different. Then it goes back, then it's something else. It's just over and over. It's just I had someone write me back after that poem. She's like, now you know, and it'll be good forever. I was like, actually, I'm not so sure about that, honey.
yeah. It's, yeah,
I, I don't know. And is it not still sad? Yeah, it's still sad. You know.
yeah,
But just the how much it changes, how quickly it can change, how we can go from devastation to elation because of all that love, that nothing ever changes all of that love. Nothing, nothing, nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is inside us forever. I mean, it definitely doesn't mean that just because you can feel that joy and hold that laughter alongside everything else that, it'll be good forever for always now. But I think there's a human urge in us that wants to believe when we have those breakthrough moments like you're describing that, okay, yeah, I'm beyond grief. I'm
Yeah,
past
it's all
it
good.
now. Yeah, like whatever. And we just, I think on a deep, deep level, we know that's not true. But on a surface level, some part of us would love to believe that that was the case. I don't remember ever feeling that because I think, I wasn't surrounded by people who were trying to rush me out of my grief or thinking like you should be past this by now. Why are you still feeling this way? I was surrounded by really kind, really loving people who were giving me a lot of space to just be where I was and to have, my freakouts and, whatever else was happening. I gave myself that permission and they did the same thing. But I think so many of us are surrounded by that pressure to move too quickly
Right.
beyond grief when I think for the rest of our lives, we will always be holding it and turning toward it as a source of sadness, but also solace and joy. And, I think that that is the other gift that this book gave me. Certainly, your poems have shown me over the years, for sure, have taught me this lesson that I feel like we're finally figuring out more as a culture and as a society, but that joy and sorrow, gratitude and grief are all just woven together and that they're not monolithic. That just because you are in grief or bereaved or have recently lost someone does not mean that you're not allowed to feel joy and delight and wonder and awe. And in fact, that maybe one way to go deeper into grief is to seek out moments of joy and wonder and delight and awe. And without even realizing it, because the poems are always wiser, the writing is always wiser than I am, in the midst of going back through this book, I realized that that is what I had been doing. That I wasn't trying to turn away from the grief, I was allowing that to have space, but I was also trying to stay alive to everything else that was coming up in the container as well. And that there were these so many small moments. I have a poem about, in the middle of winter, just lying in my bed, the day was dragging on. I'm like, reading a beach read book because I can hardly focus on anything. And I just put it down. And then this bar of light slides down the wall next to my bed. And it's so alive, and I'm alive to it. And that was one moment where I realized there was like this, this little like candlewick flame of delight and joy at seeing this. And that's when I realized that I still had the
Grief
capacity for
magnifies the
that.
small beauties.
I still had the capacity for that. And that I wouldn't always be caught in the sorrow and the grief.
Yeah. I love I love this image of you, by the way. Like with the book down and then this sliver of light, coming in. And it's one of the things I appreciate most, I think, about this book, James, is that you do include not just poems that directly touch on the grief, but also poems that point to what beauty is still here. I feel like there's such a willingness in this collection there's an expansiveness in this collection that opens to the full spectrum of what we might be experiencing. Um, all right, well, having said that, I think we probably have time maybe for you to read one more poem
Sure.
that we could offer
Yeah.
people a writing invitation from.
Mhm. Yeah, so I'll read the poem about that moment that I mentioned.
Oh, good.
Um, it's called A Slice of Actual Light. And a couple people here, I'm sure, have heard that before, including maybe you, Rosemary. Um, but I think, as you listen to this poem, and perhaps as you're listening to our conversation, I know Sheila just put in the chat, grief magnifies the small beauties. And I believe that to be true. And, I believe we're in a moment where we're all still experiencing our personal losses and challenges and griefs, and that there is a larger collective global grief that's at work within us and around us as well. And yet there are still these other moments. There are still these glimpses of beauty and really just glimpses of the natural world or a living world. So this is called A Slice of Actual Light. And then one day, life placed a slice of actual light on your plate instead of the usual portion of grief you thought would be your daily meal for the rest of your time on earth. You just turned and saw a patch of winter sun sliding up and down the wall beside the bed. Last gasp of daylight, so inviting. How could you not reach out and touch the heat that had slipped through a momentary crack in the clouds? Now believe this will keep happening. These glimmers gathering to overtake the long shadow of sorrow for whole minutes, even hours at a time.
There it is again, sweet man, the trust. Now
Mm.
believe this will keep happening.
Now believe. Yeah, yeah. And the turn of the poem toward really speaking to myself, speaking to the collective, all of us, now believe, now trust this, but really speaking that first to myself.
Mhm.
So the invitation, we'll have a little time to work through this tonight. Basically, very simple. What small glimmers similar to that have startled you awake this week? What's called you out of despair or grief, however briefly, something that you just couldn't turn away from? And if you feel called to follow this, you might begin with the phrase, and then one day, and see what image or memories come to you. So,
Mm.
beginning
Beautiful.
phrase.
Okay, so friends, once again, I'll give you a 1 minute warning when we'll be coming back. We'll take like 9 minutes. And about one more minute. Welcome back. I'm going to point out that Jenna, yes, wrote for us in the chat bar the etymology of reward. Thank you, Jenna. A prefix reinforcing the meaning in the root
Warder.
warder. Oh, warder. Okay, there we go. Is the root. I get it now. Meaning to guard, to watch, or to pay attention. So from the 14th century, it means to regard, to take notice of, to consider. Now that is stunning, actually. Isn't that beautiful?
Mm, wow.
To like really taking notice, not like a reward, no money, no prize. It's really, how do I consider this? How do I take notice? How do I become a better observer, a better receiver of the world?
Mm,
Yeah, thanks,
love that.
Jenna.
Beautiful. I knew someone would look it up. Well, thank you all so much for gathering with us tonight. This has been such a beautiful offering, and I'm just noticing in myself regarding taking note of how full I feel, and even in what I just wrote, there's a sense of greater permission and
Mm.
expansiveness as a result of our conversation tonight. So I'm really, really grateful for that. And I know a couple of people said they had some trouble getting the book through the site that we shared. You can order the book anywhere you like to get your books. Any independent bookstore can order it for you. You can get it other places you're used to finding it online. So that's not the only place, but that is the only place you can get signed copies. Um, the other thing I'll say just before we close down completely, and Rosemary can chime in too, but we will also be, Rosemary and I will be offering writing retreat together called Writing for Refuge starting March 10th. And so I believe Jenna is kindly sharing details on that, and as well as another program that Rosemary has coming up, several programs, The Mystery of Grief, Writing into Loss. Those upcoming dates are listed in the chat. So, and Rosemary and I will also be leading an in-person writing retreat at the Omega Institute in mid-June. We don't have a link or anything yet, but just some things, exciting things to put on your calendar.
Um, Thanks for bringing all those things in, James. I know that Jen is also going to be sending those out in an email with the recording for this, and so she'll have that upcoming retreat that you and I are doing. We can get her the dates for, even so you can't sign up yet at Omega, but
Click.
March 3rd apparently is when that's going to
Thank you.
happen. And then we'll also have a link to buy James's book, a link for our upcoming Evermore. Every other month, we do writing as a way to meet grief through Evermore. Um, I guess maybe, James, as a way to close, maybe each of us could read one more brief poem and then
Mm,
maybe we'll sing that song. I'll just sing it call and responsively with folks as a way to close.
sure. I to share a little poem here. An invitation to say yes to life. Say yes. Say yes to suede sandals you slip on to step outside. Yes to sun on your arms, even the pink welt of a mosquito bite rising up to greet you. Say yes to this clump of wild geraniums growing in perpetual shade behind the house through a rip in the forgotten blue tarp. Say yes to tiny pink flowers winking in the dark you move deeper into so that you may receive their promise. Yes, they say, you too can find ways to thrive, even in those places where the light seems scarce.
Okay, I also heard the trust in that poem.
Yeah, it's
You,
in every
there, it's
poem.
so beautiful how many of your poems point us toward that trust. Thank you for
Mm.
that, James. It's such a beautiful book, friends. I just cannot. If someone you know is going through a period of grief, I cannot recommend it highly enough as a way to, as a companion. And I'll share a poem I wrote in the last program that we did with Evermore. I think that was in January, and we're doing another one in March. It's always, I think, the first Wednesday of every other month. So this poem is called After I Fell in the Canyon of Grief. I didn't land. I fell, and I fell, and I fell. At first, I plummeted. I feared the landing, imagining an imminent crash. Then I fell through nights and middays, fell through kitchen floors and highways, fell through birthdays and Saturdays, fell until the sense of groundlessness was so familiar, it no longer felt like peril. I don't know when I stopped falling. There was no splat, no splash, no crushing of bones, no sense of arrival. In fact, I'm not certain I'm done with my falling. But I do know now the falling is not something to be feared. Not that we grow wings. This is not about flying, it's about falling, about meeting the gravity and feeling its force and letting it carry me in ways I have never before let myself be carried. Now, I know that the canyon of grief is just another name for living the fullest life. The reward, the reward for the falling is to no longer expect a reward. The reward of falling is to learn to not resist the falling. The reward of falling is to feel how grace falls with us as if holding our hand like a teacher, like a friend. How
Yeah,
funny that
we
reward
we
showed up.
planned all that. We
We
planned the whole
totally planned
reward
all
thing.
that. That was pretty funny.
I love that.
As I got to it, I was like, oh my gosh, there it is, the reward.
The magic. That is the magic.
Well, friends, I'll invite you this time to sing. Yes, great plan. Um, I'll invite you this time to sing along with me, and this is how, by staying muted. Stay muted, please. And I'll sing this song again from Langston Hughes. It's a poem that I put a little melody to. And I'll invite you just to repeat it right there in your own space, in your own room. If you want to sing back, please sing. Or if you prefer just to speak the words back, please just speak. And if you prefer just to feel the resonance with the words and not participate orally, but just orally with your ears, with your heart, I invite you to participate that way too. And this will be our closing. Wave of sorrow, do not drown me now. I see the island still ahead somehow. I see the island, its sands are fair. Wave of sorrow, take me there. Thank you, James Cruz. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Evermore. Please check out Evermore and support all the ways that they support people who are bereaved. You will be amazed by all the resources they offer and all the incredible programs they have coming up. Incredible programming, so many experiential ways to show up. I just looked at their website and I couldn't even believe, Jenna, you have been like outdoing yourself with art, with music. There's going to be conversations, so many ways that you can be supported in meeting your grief. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Such an honor to be with you tonight. Thank you.
And if you'd like to unmute and just make a big old noise, this is a great time to do that.
Woo-hoo!
Hey, I can make a
Thank
big old
you.
noise.
Thank
Yay!
Thank you, James
Thank
and Rosemerry.
you.
Thank you so much, both of
Thank
you. Thank you
you.
so much,
Thank
all of
you.
you.
Thank
Thank you
Thank
you.
for
you.
singing, Rosemary.
Perfect. So needed, so appreciated. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Thanks,
night.
everyone.